tonight, the Marinos Maliali will interview Petros Patounas on the topic, the clinic of the act.
Hello, Petro.
Hello, Marino.
So, I would like to take the opportunity for this interview to explore various aspects in psychoanalytic practice and talk about the differences between the clinic of psychoanalysis and the clinic of the act. I would like to start by asking the question with regards to the desire of the analyst is to produce absolute difference, as it was talked by Jacques Lacan. What is this? What is the desire of the analyst in the clinic of psychoanalysis? And what is this to create absolute difference?
Well, my orientation in relation to first of all, I don't consider psychoanalysis clinic. For me, I remove the word clinic, and I think I mentioned another time, but tonight officially I'm using the word the askesis, the ascesis of the act. Η askesis της πράξης in Greek. My first writing was about the clinic of the act. It was a response to Miller, some writings he made in the late 80s, where he mentioned that he dreams a psychoanalysis without the other. Psychoanalysis without the other, I think Lacan had a similar comment. I forgot where I saw it, but I have it somewhere written. Maybe I mentioned it another time. A clinic without the other can only exist when the orientation of psychoanalysis, using the other and passing through the other, and without foreclosing the other, it's a clinic of the act. Okay? So that was my response to that back then. Initially, was my response to that article by Miller. And but in the process of my formation and a lot of chats with Penny and Angelos and my own reading and experience of the practice, I started using the word exaskesis or askesis. Askesis has a reference to the praxis, but also has some dimension of, I will use a word that is not very popular in the psychoanalytic circles. It has how you call it, a connection with the spirituality, but not in the sense of connecting with spirits, but the psychoanalyst being close to faith. And that I say that because Lacan spoke about the knowledge in the real, and I think Miller doesn't really believe that. But I believe that in the real, there is no knowledge, there is faith. Of course, a faith that is not on the level of religion, because with religion you cannot construct your own act. You have to follow a specific path. And I'm referring also now to you know the unconscious God that Lacan mentioned, and my own response to that was, you know, the true atheist believes that God exists, but he cannot, he's all powerful, but he cannot perform, he cannot act. So because he's castrated of his own act, the act goes to the subject. The subject has to perform. So this is about the clinic of the act. And what was the other dimension of your question?
The desire of the analyst in the clinic of psychoanalysis.
Okay.
To create absolute difference.
Okay. Well, for me, I disagree that this should be this is the desire of the analyst to create absolute difference if someone is working with a technique. Absolute difference, it's the best explanation for it. I heard it from Angelos. Angelos Chali is one of the psychoanalysts in our school. But very simplified, it's not to be caught into the analysand's fantasy. Okay, so the analysand can create something else, not in relation to the subject supposed to know. The way I see this desire of the analyst has nothing to do with the desire of the analysand, because I start from the precondition that the desire of the analyst for me, or what is called desire, is the execution of his own act in life. I said it many times in the seminars that I don't believe that desire of the analyst is something that we utilize. Please put your microphones on mute, please. I don't believe that it's something that it's a tool that you can utilize during the time of the session, as if it's a tool or a key or something, because that refers to a specific position. And when we are speaking about position, exactly we mean a position which is something without movement. It's a picture. That's why a lot of people, they say it's a semblance. I don't think that we should practice psychoanalysis on a position. I say it's a movement. The place of the analysis is a movement. It's a movement which has been foreclosed before analysis. Why is it a movement? Because that desire that we discover for ourselves, it becomes a way of life. And we use it in all aspects of our life, including psychoanalysis. Because there are people who, they don't want to become analysts, and they are very connected with their desire, and they make with interventions in the society, some of them by speaking, some of them by consciously making interventions, but most of them, how do they make interventions? By being connected with their desire, by identifying with their own act. They just shine and inspire people. You don't have to do much. So for me, the desire of the analyst, it's his own transference towards his own act, and it is not focused on the session. And because he's so connected and inspired by him connected to the act of life that he chose and chose to dedicate his body, that is in the sessions as well. You don't have to situate yourself in relation to the diagnosis. That's one of the keys of diagnosis, that the Lacanians, they say it's for how to situate yourself in relation to the analysand. That's why you need a structural diagnosis. And at the end, how to construct the case. There are other ways to construct the case, which is not of the moment to speak about them, and other ways to situate yourself in the sessions. So the desire, what is called the desire of the analyst, it's connected with the transfers, and to understand the differences of what it is said by Lacanians and what I am saying, it's this simple statement that the desire of the analyst is something that is generated during the sessions, and okay, the desire towards the act is something that you constantly should have in your life. It's your compass in life, and this is what you do in the sessions. And that's why a lot of psychoanalysts, even though they have all this knowledge and reading Lacan or whatever, they fail in connecting with the social bond. In what way are we going to connect with the social bond? With our desire. But how is that desire? The analysands, they don't know, and they cannot operate. Some people that they want to come to us, it's because of our stance in life. There are people who will speak to you, and because you just, you just shine, in quotes, the shine, they want to come and have analysis with you. If you don't have that connection with your own act, they are not going to come to you to have analysis, regardless of all the knowledge you have. Because the desire of the analyst, it became like a tool. I repeat that, it's like a tool. And if we speak about a tool or a position, it means that it's a part of a technique. Okay? If you are practicing with a technique, you cannot generate transfers in the society. And this is something very important that a lot of people, they forget. It's one of the reasons I believe, not because CBT is faster and capitalism and whatever. People, even now, they get hooked by people who have this shiny desire, that they believe they can make changes. Maybe they're coaches, maybe they're healers, they're spiritual leaders, but they have that that's a desire of the analyst. not what is generated in the sessions. Okay, so about the absolute difference, I kind of disagree with that, because it's the same response I gave to when people they speak about the psychoanalysis as being the opposite of something. I saw a couple of days ago was a statement by one of the Lacanian circles. Again, they situated psychoanalysis as the opposite of something. It doesn't have to be the opposite of something. It doesn't have to be. It's as if we say that in order for us to exist, there has to be something that it constantly fails, that we need to be the opposite of it. We have to turn around other discourses. I think the way they concentrate on that is because they are afraid that if we are not the opposite of something, we are going to become a dogma, which in many schools it became a dogma anyway. You are not becoming a dogma. If the orientation of psychoanalysis is the act, then the only opposite that we can mention there, it's apraxia. If we orient at the praxis, then the divided subject is between praxis and apraxia. Okay, so there is no need for absolute difference, because even if the analyst wants to put us into a specific place, and that's the first attempt that they are doing, they want us to put us in a specific place in relation to their fantasy. If we are connected with our act, we don't have to avoid that. Because if you are trying to avoid that, you are practicing on the imaginary. The first step in the graph of desire, it's exactly what I mentioned a couple of times in my seminars, the first powerful interventions to bring up their conscious. And those interventions, they are cuts and interventions on the image. This is where the analyst, how they want to, you are just another human being and they want to connect with you with their fantasy. But you don't try to be different, absolutely different because of that. You just make interventions, because you can make two types of interventions on the graph. One is based on the jouissance and one related to desire. These very powerful interventions is to call, I will use another term from religion, is to call the spirit of desire, to try to resurrect it. And there in the first sessions, which you can call them preliminary, for me it's, you are going to see if that analyst will generate their own desire to continue the sessions, or if they are going to stick to their symptom, and that it's a call for you to have that specific place in your fantasy and start practicing on the imaginary. So you don't need absolute difference. You have actually absolute union, but with what? With your own act, not to negotiate your own act. And then the analyst will have to make a choice if they are going to give up some of their symptom to get something from those first powerful interventions. If they kept coming to a session and they are concentrated on their symptom without elaborating and giving material, they are not ready for analysis. Okay, so that's what I say as a response also to those who they want to practice with a clinical structure. You don't need to have a diagnosis. This is the diagnosis you have to do. If they are able, if at that moment of their life, to have access in this to facilitate their own act. Because this is what we are doing. We are facilitating space so the analysts can construct their own act. So that's my response, Marino, to your questions.
Thank you very much for your response. You spoke about interventions and technique. We know that from Freud, that Freud was using technique in order to cure his patients. Then with Lacan, we have the truth, and we have a sort of a magnifying glass on the analysis and speech. How can we use, or is it the right way to perform a psychoanalytic session by analyzing the analysant's speech? Is there a technique for that?
there are two ways to practice psychoanalysis, including Lacanian psychoanalysis. One is through the ascesis, and one through a technique. Okay, so and both ways are okay. Both ways are okay, depending from the analyst. And at the end of the day, for many different reasons, it's people, they have to choose how they are going to practice, and that has to do with how many doors they were willing to open in relation to their own analysis. There is no semblance of how we practice analysis, including what I say, the ascesis. Okay, I think Lacan was practicing with the ascesis, especially after he came back from his trip to Japan, when he perceived the letter. He was teaching them there about the technique, but he came back with the conception of the letter, and he went with the technique and he returned with the ascesis. So you can practice with both ways. And here I want to say that even though you're practicing, even though someone is practicing with the technique, they will have to find their own signature to the real. What shapes even the technique is our own way to the real. Our own way to the real. What is it? What I mean by that? Some of you might practice by having this connection of logic of the signifier, that they can perceive the contradictions. Okay, it is a technique, but it's a technique that is very special to you. That's the best case scenario for the technique. If it's a technique that everybody practices, it means they haven't found their own way to the real. And if you don't find your own way to the real, I don't think that psychoanalysis is practiced there.
Okay, thank you. Lacanian psychoanalysis and diagnosis. What is diagnosis and why is it needed?
Well, diagnosis is the diagnosis of a structure. It's how the person situates themselves into speech. You find their connection with the other, their symptom, which is in relation to the other, to desire, to the phallus, the signifiers, whatever. It is necessary for those who want to practice with the technique, because there is this Brazilian guy, it's one of the famous psychoanalysts. There was this Brazilian guy who translated one article I wrote many years ago. I wrote that psychoanalysis is useless, and I kind of make this because to perform psychoanalytic session, some people, they speak about performing, but when they speak performing, it reminds me of sex. So I wrote a response to this performance of this protecting the ego that sends the schools, not Lacanian, they say, but even though to have these preliminary sessions, I compare psychoanalysis with a lover who cannot have sex, who cannot perform. So, and because I knew about my opinion of the graph of desire, that in Lacan's terms of aggressivity, that you have to bring up their conscious and desire in the first sessions. And I think the reason he said that is to test desire. So this, I think, is Antonio Guinet. It's one of the, he's okay, he's a good analyst. I mean, I wouldn't go to him, but he's a good analyst. I'll go to Penny. But he's a good analyst for other people, you know, who have to choose our analyst. Anyway, his book, there is a book about how to practice, and he kind of became the Bible in Latin America of how to practice. And he's very serious about it. You have to do preliminary sessions, do diagnosis, and then from this diagnosis, you situate yourself in a specific place according to diagnosis. Okay, that's fine. You know, because I spoke with other analysts, I said, what about the mistakes that are happening in terms of diagnosis? They said, but you can change it later. So the reason to approach, let's say I diagnose somebody with neurosis, and then after 3 months, I realize it's psychosis. And then what would I do? I was working 3 months as if the guy was neurosis, and then I change it. So this change, if the analyst is there, it doesn't make any difference to them. It makes difference from the analyst who doesn't know how to situate himself if he doesn't offer this structural diagnosis. But I understand why it is necessary in many countries, because most of Lacanians in Latin America, for example, are psychologists. There are psychologists trained in Lacanian orientation. You can go to universities and receive psychology degree, but based on Lacanian orientation. So you've got to have something, some sort of a point of reference, okay? And it's a good way to bring psychologists to connect with that. So it is kind of a point of reference, especially for those who they don't have access, or they don't have access yet to the ascesis. Because if you ask me personally, who had access to this nobody that I mentioned many times, maybe I would put 5 people from all the analysts I have read or met. One is Penny. Elena, can you hear me, guys?
Yes, yes.
Marino, Angele, can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Εγώ δεν σας ακούω καθόλου.
Τώρα ακούγεται, Ελένα? I think it's something with, check your microphone, the mute, on the bottom. Virginia, can you speak with the chat with Elena? Virginia will call you.
Δεν ακούω τίποτε.
Okay. Να σε πιάσει τηλέφωνο. Virginia, please call her or arrange it. Anyway, what were you saying, Marino?
About the position. About the position and about...
What is diagnosis?
Yes.
So, but if we speak about diagnosis, the best case scenario and a very good scenario, it's the best case scenario of diagnosis is Lacanian diagnosis. And also it's a very good tool for psychiatrists. There are many mistakes that are happening in psychiatry, especially when the medication doesn't function, because they believe that there's an incident we had yesterday, is because they thought that by giving 8 years of medication to that psychopath, that he would be okay, that they cure him. They didn't take into consideration nothing structurally. So the best way to approach psychiatry, because it's an academic discipline of psychology, is through Lacanian diagnosis. So it has its function. We don't want to foreclose it, but I'm introducing the ascesis because there is something else there that I believe Lacan was onto that orientation, especially if you are into topology. Of course, maybe you know that with the exception of Jean Girard, the Lacanian schools, especially the big ones, they care very little about topology. Because if you give emphasis to topology, then you cannot fit that movement of the topology or the additions that I offer to psychoanalysis with the act and the construction of the new knot. You cannot understand it with the structures. So what is a diagnosis? It's this what I just said. But as long as you have diagnosis, you've got the benefits of it for those who want to practice with the diagnosis. Okay, but there is another dimension of the human psyche, especially that which relates to the no body, the true desire proper, which it is called feminine jouissance, which cannot be explored as long as you practice. You cannot, even the analysis, if you are situating yourself to diagnosis, the analysis cannot have access to that.
Thank you. So, Jacques Lacan was saying in his teachings that the analyst must have the position of the object A. The psychoanalyst as an object A. What can you tell us about that? What is this position?
position is to hold that object, because that object, as you know, they are calling object, not object of desire, but object causing desire. Okay, so I will speak very briefly for it, and there is a lot of elaborations in books and on the internet, so it's an urge for people to go read it. But by holding the object A, I don't practice like that. Okay, because if you are holding the position of the object A, you must never touch the jouissance, you must never touch the object A. I do touch the object A. I go straight to the object A, because that's how you provoke the urge for somebody, for their true desire. Their true desire is not around the object A. The object A, in my opinion, causes a desire as long as you are trapped in the jouissance or the desire that was given by the other. That's why Lacan and other analysts say desire is always desire of the other. It's desire of the other because the subject operates within that same discourse. It doesn't create its own. And I'm not saying about, oh, language is always borrowed by something. It's not. It's how you situate yourself in language, how you construct your own act. Okay? That, can speak about your own desire. Desire, it's a construction. So by holding the position of the object A, it's a position that you keep analyzing and speaking, because if you hold the object A, what is happening there? What is the object A? Is that which you hold on the other? Sorry, that it's that object that you seek in the other to complete you. Okay, so what is happening there if you are holding the position of the object A? The analyzer is trying to get that object, to find that object A in you. And here is where you can connect your first question of the semblance, but also what was your first question? Was about
the desire of the analyst.
Yes, the absolute difference. They are trying to get that from you, but you are trying to avoid that. Anyway, you are holding that object. The analyzer tries to reach that object, to get it from you, to identify with you. Maybe you are avoiding these identifications, whatever, but that keeps pushing, and of course you become the object supposed to know, but you know that. So, and in the process, because of the analysis, what is created there, because of this position of the analyst, it's you understand. Basically, you understand. I put that in quotes. Has nothing to do with the faith I mentioned earlier, because you need faith to construct your act. What is happening is that you lose faith to your ideal. Because of analysis, you understand that the analysis is an object A, and you lose faith to your ideal. Okay, so that's why you've got this position of atheism and the position of pessimism, which I mentioned many times, that it's as if you are alive again, but you are behind the tomb. I always use the metaphor of Christ's tomb and the big rock that was sealed by the Romans. You are alive, but you cannot be resurrected. You are behind that big entrance, this big stone. So, so you are losing faith to your fantasy, and you become a pessimist. And that's why they say fantasy, it's a support to desire. It's a support to desire, but what sort of desire? Desire that is, it's what I call the latus, the lathanusa. I think Lacan calls it the latus, but I call it the lathanusa because that's a proper Greek word. And I think he should use a proper Greek word there. So it's a desire that is created because of that knot. It's not your desire. Even if you reach a Sinthome, which is shifting things in the same space. Again, I will bring the feminine jouissance here, because if there is that sort of jouissance, that desire is beyond the body. If it is beyond the body, it's beyond the signifiers of the Borromean knot. So there is access to that. There is access to something that is beyond the object A. The object A can exist only within the Borromean knot and only veiled by a signifier of the fantasy. When they say that the object appears and brings anxiety, in my opinion, it disappears, because you cannot have an object A without the signifier that is marking it. It's an object loss, but okay, it's an object loss, but that's not the object loss, is not the object A. The object A is the loss marked by a signifier. And when the signifier is detached from that loss, that the object A becomes an I or a true voice. You can see that in psychosis. It's not an object A anymore, because it's embodied by the other. It's embodied by the other, or it's embodied by an illusion. That's why people tell you in sessions, I couldn't experience the arise on them. It's not an object A anymore. It's an I. Okay, it's something that is not marked by the signifier. The signifier protects and sustains. And the signifier with the object A, they are connected, sustains. Okay, it's there. The object A is there to sustain the structure. So here I mark my own difference with the concept of anxiety. Maybe I think I spoke with Angelos and Penny about it, but it's the first time I say it publicly. That for me, anxiety, I can prove it my own way of proving it is through my clinical cases. Maybe I do a presentation this year. It's when the object A disappears, not when it appears, that anxiety is produced. Because when it's there, in its place within the structure of the Borromean knot, there is no anxiety. It's when the knot is not in its place that anxiety is produced, when the subject is about to lose their bodies.
Thank you. So you spoke about fundamental fantasy.
I don't know if I answered your question. Did you say something else? Hold the place of the object A. Yes, that's it. You
Yes.
hold the object A to create desire among the things, as I said. But what sort of desire? That's a fake desire. That's a desire sustains the imaginary, and at the end of the day, what is happening? Because of analysis, the subject is disconnected from his own idea. Okay, the way I practice, and this is another, my opinion, maybe I don't call myself Lacanian because I don't want to cause problems with Lacanians. If they are 20,000 saying something else, then I should rename myself as maybe psychoanalyst only. I don't want to be in a conflict or something, but for me, the desire has to be generated because I have a desire to my own act. I don't have to force it, but because I am a desiring being, I am an ergon, which I mentioned, the being of the act. Okay, is this desire that is transmitted in the sessions as much as it is transmitted it is given in the transmission of psychoanalysis. If we don't create psychoanalysis by providing knowledge, even though knowledge it's a support to desire, then how do we form analysis? It's through desire. And the same thing we do in the sessions. But if we are in the place of the object A, we don't cause desire. We cause a desire for that ideal in order to disconnect the subject from that ideal, because the subject is suffering because of that idea. But there is no connection with facilitating a space for the act. If we facilitate the space of the act by just doing our connection to the act of life, okay, this is how we facilitate our interventions there. So, and here, I can tell you something, I think I wrote it in the first book that I published. I had an encounter with a psychoanalyst who asked a true master psychoanalyst, Lacanian. He says, do you know how we detect the master signifiers? Of course, there is a technique to detect the master signifiers, but my response was, you cannot, the master signifiers are not detected, they detect. What is happening if you are aligned with your own desire, the subject will give it to you if they are aligned with their own desire as well. And that's one of the tips if you are practicing analyst, especially in the first sessions, to see the flow of continuation of desire and giving signifiers. If they are stuck with their symptom, there is something lacking from their own desire. And if in the process of analysis they stop giving signifiers and free associating, because soon they're going to stop. It has nothing to do with bad transference or whatever, because they just want to stop for their own reasons. Yes.
So you spoke about fundamental fantasy, and we were speaking about object A as well, and the position of the analyst as an object A. So how can we speak about the analyst holding the position of the object A, and at the same time say that the analysis will take the analysand beyond the fundamental fantasy?
Well, that's how I said it earlier. The way they practice, most Lacanians, they hold that object, and their own way of crossing the fantasy. That's a good question, actually, because it gives me the opportunity to say it very simply and plainly. If you are holding the place of the object A, give me a second. If you are holding the place of the object A, then the crossing of the fantasy, it happens in the following way. By disconnecting from your own ideal. The ideal is the symptom. That's how they believe that they cross the fantasy. And actually, they don't cross the fantasy. The best case scenario is resituating themselves in the same fantasy, but differently. Because the idea is shift, but it's the same fantasy. Okay? So there is no crossing of the fantasy. There is a reorganization of the fantasy with this technique. If Lacan was alive, I will respond that to him, and I think he will appreciate it. I believe he was practicing in the way I was telling you, especially in the last years of his life.
So
Yes.
we are talking about symptoms and the reorganization of the symptoms.
And that marks, and what I said in the last two questions of you, marks two main differences from the way I'm teaching psychoanalysis. I consider it Lacanian, but I don't mind if it's just psychoanalysis. From the not mainstream, because it's not mainstream, from the rest of the Lacanians, or Lacanians proper, let's call them like that. Yes.
Thank you. So symptoms in the psychoanalytic treatment, how can we best describe a symptom as it is explained in psychoanalysis? And you spoke about the reorganization of the symptom, which is the Sinthome as the end of analysis.
Yes.
So what is the symptom and what is the Sinthome?
Well, my first reaction to this is to tell you to go and read about it. And that's why I will, I'm kind of bored to answer these questions. The symptom, you find it by how the subject is connected with the other. Okay, what is the metaphor in which they connect with the other? Okay, how they use the other, how they are trying to get their positions through the other. Okay, and the Sinthome is how they are reorganized in the fantasy, sometimes with the use of the phallus if they're psychotic, or how they rename the other. Okay, you rename the other differently, so the other takes a different dimension, and you've got within that same fantasy, you take a different position, something like that. But you can read. There are so many articles there to read about it.
Okay, so the Sinthome It's the end of analysis. So it is what we often hear about the testimony of the past. So when the analysand reaches the point of that reorganization of the Borromean knot, that analysand can go through the process of the testimony of the past and become an analyst.
You want my opinion?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I will quote Richard Klein. I like his idea of the past because there was a depth into it, which it took me a while to understand it. And that's why I value his interventions. So he said this is just a bunch of people. He said it without, of course, without attacking them, but with his usual humor, and which is very valuable for psychoanalysis. Most of them don't have humor, actually, including Freud. It's a bunch of analysts going around and talking, and I was thinking about it. So for me, the true past, because what is happening in many psychoanalytic schools is that they become a word within the word. They are valuable, you know, how they train, how they offer formation, etc. But most of the times they offer the opportunity of a past to someone who showed dedication to the school alone. Showing dedication to the school alone, I would say why I say alone, it doesn't make you a psychoanalyst of the school. It shouldn't. Because there are people who are, they seek to be psychoanalysts because of that signifier, to have a body. If they make psychoanalysis a signifier, and being a psychoanalyst, it's to give them a body, but to have that as well, they shouldn't become psychoanalysts of the school. But it's not my school. So in my opinion, the actual past should be, that's why we have in the school of the Freudian Letter, we have the process of transliteration, which is quite an intense process. I'm not going to speak about it now. But the true past, it should be not only when the analyst shows its dedication to the school, because that's necessary. Even when Lacan says that the psychoanalyst verifies himself, it's not just, oh, I say I'm a psychoanalyst and I go and do practice psychoanalysis. If I belong to a school and I'm working towards a formation within that school, I cannot just be, I would be a psychoanalyst just like that, without the responsibility of that, and defy the work in that school. There has to be some process and some mixture there. Anyway, that's another topic. So the true past is when the psychoanalyst, the practicing analyst, is causing desire to other people outside of the school. When they come and find him and they say, I want to have psychoanalysis with Marinos, I want to have psychoanalysis with John, I want to have psychoanalysis with Penny. When they come and find him, because he has managed to become a point of reference in many different ways, you can do that. As long as you are a desiring being, you can just exude the desire from your body. Okay? When you manage to do that and start having analysis and even causing other people through your patients or analysis to cause them desire to be involved in psychoanalysis, then you become a psychoanalyst of the school. There is no other way for me, for someone to be a psychoanalyst of the school, if they haven't managed to find by themselves a position in the social bond. And that you can only do if you perform magic. Why I mention the word magic here, which is again an anathema for psychoanalysis. I'm not talking about the abracadabra of making magic potions, but the abracadabra of desire. That's the magic in psychoanalysis, to cause desire. There's no mechanics there, okay? There is no technique for that. It's just you have access to your own act, to become one with your own act, okay? For your act to become the body. That's the non-body, which I say. So if you are that, you just, by your presence, by just talking to people, they want to come and have analysis with you. You don't use tricks, you don't enter, you don't use these discourses of depression, even if you're a psychologist, okay? You can have people to come for you there, but they will stay to analysis with you if you are doing analysis directed to desire if you don't concentrate on being a healer of depression. They come to you because they believe that you've got that. That's desire proper. So for me, that's the true path. And if you ask me, very few people achieved it from all schools. So that's my own explanation of the past. If you want for the others explanation of the past, which is important to read actually, Google or going by book, or not you, just anybody who's interested.